Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever it might be where you are at. You're listening to the Humpday Coffee Talk Show. We record this show every Wednesday at noon Eastern Time, 9 a.m. Pacific Time. You can call in and speak to us if you'd like during our live recording. The number is 301-TALK-GAY. We also have a text message line. The different number is 9097-GAY. Of course, you can join us in the chat room on queerpublicradio.com. And finally, you may Skype, call us. Our name on Skype is Gay Talk Radio. It's all stuck together like it's one word. During our Humpday Coffee Show, we welcome callers and listeners to interact with us. In the absence of that interaction, we will be more than happy to provide you with news and current events which affects our LGBT community. On with the show. Hey there. Good morning, everybody. Tom here. It's August 24th. Welcome to the Humpday Coffee Talk Show. Today we're going to be talking with a awesome lady, Michelle Elizabeth Brown. We are so honored to be talking with Michelle Elizabeth Brown. She's a member of the board of directors of the National Black Justice Coalition in Washington, D.C. It's a civil rights organization dedicated to empowering black LGBT people. She has received numerous accolades for her work to help bring awareness and confront the problems of homelessness, affordable housing, and drug addiction. And she's a champion for youth empowerment. Her writings have appeared in several Michigan newspapers, including Between the Lines, and she's a published author as well. Some of her awards and honors and accolades include, in 2011, she was honored in Who's Who in Black Detroit, the 5th edition, as a community leader. In 2011, again, she was honored in Out Magazine's Hidden 105 list, published in response to their Power 50 list, which had no people of color. In 2010, she was a nominee for the Lifetime Achievement Award for activism in Michigan LGBT community. In 2009, elected the first vice chairperson of the National Black Justice Coalition. In 2007, she got the Media Award for the annual Pride Banquet. In 2005, a Catalyst Award from Triangle Foundation. In 2005, also a Spirit of Detroit Award. 2004, 2005, and 2006, the Diversity Outreach of Human Rights Campaign. 2007, an Award of Merit for National Society of Poetry. In 1996, the Good Neighbor Award, Class Community Neighborhood Development Corporation. 1992, the WJLB Radio Strong Achievers Award in Detroit. Yeah. I got a little audio clip for her that I thought was totally awesome. We're going to share it with you. It's called Lift Every Voice. It's an audio clip from YouTube, and just thought we'd share that with you at the top of the show here so you can just hear a kind of a outline of what's going on with Michelle E. Brown.
I don't really realize where it all began. I think I was in about the 5th grade. And you know how you go and your family sing, and my father had a Playboy. It was June, and June was busting out all over, and I went like, oh, wow. And so I sort of stayed that way, interesting. But I found that also there was always those things with people like, why don't you act more like a girl? Although I did always act like a girl. But, I didn't want to date. I didn't want to do that. Although I was always the, oh, so-and-so has a son, he doesn't have a date, send Michelle, because, hey, it was safe. In high school, I noticed that I had girlfriends, but then it was like, it was still very closeted, and because we were teenagers, people were okay with, like, experimental, So, but as it went on, I realized, it wasn't experimental, it was real, and I had feelings for the women that I was meeting. So I had really good relationships. When I went and told my mother that I was gay, my mother is my hero. I mean, she's passed on. My mother has been a mother not only to me, but to many of my friends whose family rejected them. My mother was there. It was fine, you know. She said, hey, so my mother's favorite sign was, well, it's not like you're the first. So that was just wonderful. My father, on the other side, up until shortly after my mother died, and he died 2 years later, referred to me as his Fruit Loop and her Fruit Loop friends. And I have a son. There's many times when he would question my ability to be a good mother because, you know, you're going to make him grow up and be what's one of his nicer euphemisms. Oh, light in the loafers, a sissy, and all like that. My son is, you know, straight as an arrow. Go figure. But my father constantly did that, and it wasn't until after my mother died, and he ended up with me, which was not what he wanted as his caretaker. And it was, you know, he just did not want that. But after a while, we sort of hit that point to where it was like, okay, you got me. To where it was like, okay. And towards the end, he did say, you know, I hope one day you can find someone who can love you, you know, and it was okay. But it's been an up and down thing. I think that, you know, the more out I am, and I'm pretty out there, but I think I do everything passionately. I've always been a community activist. I've worked on affordable housing. I've worked with unwed mothers. I've worked with people with addiction. And at one point in time, what really made me really be out, I was an executive director for a neighborhood development corporation. And we wanted to do affordable housing for people who were living with HIV and AIDS. People living with HIV and AIDS. And one would have thought that we wanted to paint the building bright pink and put a rainbow awning out in front. And the backlash was so hard, not because they were talking about people living with AIDS, that they saw it as gay people, and they just did not want that. And it was across the street from a big institution, which said that they had people come in all the time, and they didn't want them to see that building. And we ended up going to court, suing them, but what happened was things got dragged along to where now that site is a parking lot. And people who are living with HIV and AIDS still need affordable housing. So about at that point in time, it was like, you know, enough. And all the passion and energy I have, I started putting it towards LGBT issues. Because guess what? LGBT issues are everybody's issues. And so after that, I'm out. I'm here. I'm here. I'm queer. And you know what? I'm real used to it.
Hello, Michelle. Thanks for being with us.
Oh, hello, Tom. I'm going to tell you, you know, when you said lift every voice, I was expecting to hear lift every voice and thing, and I went like, oh my God, that's me.
It's a little clip I found on YouTube that it really blew me away. I was like, oh, so you touched on so many points there. We're so honored to have you. Thanks for so much for being with us today.
Well, I'm glad to be with you.
So let's teach people and the listeners about Michelle E. Brown. You know, not to be confused with the numerous other Michelle Browns out there.
That's why I used to eat all the time.
I learned that the hard way because I came up, when we were getting ready for the show, I came up with all this stuff. And she said, that's not me, that's not me, that's not me, that's not me. You know, I'm like, oh my God.
Well, you know what? And I didn't know, and I read the things from the griot all the time, and I had never noticed that there was a Michelle Brown there. So, I mean, it was like eye-opening to both of us.
Well, you know, they were awesome things, but they weren't you. So that's not what we were aiming for. So I reworked things a little bit. So let's find out about Michelle E. Brown. So let's see. Where were you born? Let's start there.
Well, I am from Detroit. In fact, my mother was from Detroit too, and it's really sort of interesting that when my mother's generation, you found very few people who were born in Detroit. They were usually part from the South and part of it, the Northern migration. But my mother was born here, and I was from here, so I'm a Motown original.
Wow, and you're still there now, right?
Yes, I am.
Good. How about other places? Have you moved around any at all in between then and now?
Well, for a while I lived in Atlanta. Um, Loved it, but came back because there's my mother family need. So I came back. I lived in Atlanta. I spent a great deal of time in New York and in Washington, D.C., where people say I might as well get an apartment because I go there a lot. But I've traveled a lot around the country and a little bit outside of the country. So I love my country.
Oh, yeah, I think we all do, and sometimes it's kind of a love-hate relationship, huh?
That's true. That's true. It really is. You sort of get caught in between. There is that thing where they say the greatness of this country, and you go around and you travel and you meet the people and you see the sights, and it's so great and so wonderful. But then there's that downside, that hidden within all of this greatness is this racism, homophobia, and just xenophobia against whatever is different.
Yeah, so there you go. So well said. Anything or anybody that's different. Yeah, so much. So that's a huge statement there because that does seem to be the issue. I mean, we seem to be cliquish. I don't know if that's like our nature as humans to be, to bond together in little groups, but it's divisional.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and sometimes I talk about that, especially around pride, when they say, well, like there'll be the general pride, then there might be a Latino pride, and there might be a black pride. And I do understand that need to celebrate that uniqueness of you, but at a certain point, you know, we should celebrate just being us. I mean, you don't have a black 4th of July, Latino 4th of July, and 4th of July. You have 4th of July where we all celebrate being Americans. And I would like to see, but you still have Little Italy and you have Chinatown. So it doesn't have to be exclusive, to where you just forget about who you are or just only black stay with black and Latino. But at the same time, celebrate that part of you, but be a part of the community at large because we're all humans.
Yeah, it seems. Yeah, because I think like you say, we're all aiming towards the same goal. And I think I would hope so anyway. So I think that the problem that we get with this cliquish divisional kind of stuff going on is where we step over that line where we say, well, we're better than you.
Exactly.
And
Exactly. And,
yeah.
and that's one of the things I often try, because, people often, when they look at gay rights, they think it's like special or that maybe we think, and I said, you know what, we're not talking about special rights. We're talking the same rights because, that's the important thing. I'm the same as you. And I found like through the number of things that I do, like even through my writing, through my poetry and that, I've been able to touch on that common ground. And then from there, then once you establish, oh, wait a minute, if you cut her, she's going to bleed just like me, or she cares about kids just like me. Then from there, you can go on and have a deeper discussion.
Oh, definitely, big time. So let's see here. I wanted to touch base on your upbringing, your family life, because on one of the bits of information I saw you state that your father was kind of abusive of you when you were a youngster. I think you claimed that he tried to actually take your life on a couple occasions.
Yeah, I mean, and like some people go like, oh, you can talk about it. It wasn't initial, but I mean, there are times that my life has been punctuated where I can jokingly go by when my father tried to kill me. But the first time was like I was in high school, and he wanted the basic good girl. Don't make any problems. Don't do anything. And apparently somebody he worked with had seen me coming out of a gay bar. And I had already been rebellious. He liked long hair. I'd cut my hair all off to wear an afro. I would wear whatever he said, yes, do no. I was just like rebellious. And that was just like the straw. And he just like totally went off. And at one point was going to shoot me with a shotgun, at which point my mother said, hey, that's enough. But I took off, and that started my in and out of home for a bit of time. And it ended, I mean, I'd say about 2 years before he died, when, I became his sole caretaker, and there was one time when it just wasn't what he wanted, and he was just angry, and he went to go get his gun, and, I ended up pushing him away and calling the police on him. But the good news is there is a story of reconciliation and coming to terms, which is why I can feel okay about talking about my dad.
And that's what amazed me, because I mean, it's a perfect story to me of going from one extreme to the other, and I think it's a story of hope because it shows that anyone under certain circumstances can come over to be a little bit more understanding and accepting, and or at least tolerant.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, and that's why I don't believe I see people sometimes who are trying to do it so much that they're almost becoming masochistic, but I don't believe in that. But I think at a certain point, you just have to stand up, because I know the last time with my father, I was just like, look, it is what it is, and we're sort of stuck with each other, and I'm here to take care of you. You might not like who and how I am, but you know what? Respect me. I'm going to respect you. And once we got to that point, what was and was not acceptable behavior as two human beings and that level of respect, suddenly he was able to open up and see this person who had developed, and you know what? The fruit hadn't fallen too far from the tree. It was just a different way that I did it. And to where he was starting to look like, oh, she's compassionate, she does this, she's caring, she has commitments. Why is she so passionate about some of the things that she's doing? And so we were able to come to terms to where I will say that at the end, not only did he like me, I think he always loved me as his child, but he loved me as Michelle, and he liked me as his child. And towards the end, I think he was very proud of the woman I had become, because I was my own person and I stood up for what I believed in.
Yeah, I think that's pretty awesome. I mean, because I think so many people a lot of times, they're like, well, this person's, so negative, and every word and syllable that comes out of their mouth is negative, and there's no hope for them. But I think that's why I'm, hammering on this so much, is because of the fact that this speaks directly to the opposite of that. And
I think that other part has to do with my mother. My mother was so welcoming and accepting. And my father had always been ill, and we thought he would go first. But my mother died suddenly, and it was like she left me with this responsibility. It was sort of like she knew I was going to get caught with it, because I have a brother and a sister, but they both sort of like headed for the hills. And it was like all of her responsibilities sort of fell on me, and it was sort of like not wanting to let her down, but also I'm proud of the parts of her, the part of her personality and my heritage from her family. Part of it, I think, makes me who I am. And so, sometimes you got to step up to the plate, even if it's not the best, but you work with it. And that was just it. You can't run from responsibility all the time.
yeah, and I hate to sound biased, but I think a lot of times that members of our community end up in that position where, because, and I kind of lean towards the marriage issue, where we really don't, the marriage has become more recent news within our community. And so I'm going back a little ways. And so, we didn't have the ability to say those words, till death do us part. You leave your mother and your father and you cling to another. All that evolution, if you will. But I see in a lot of cases I have seen where members of our LGBT community have ended up caring for family members and a lot of times their parents and whatnot. And I just think that's something that needs to be noted.
And I agree with you, because I've talked with a lot of other ones. I also inherited, and I have an aunt left, one relative left who's like 93. And with my sister and my cousins and everything, they get a get out of jail free card because it's like, oh, well, I didn't call her because, she has to go home to her husband and this and that. Now I have to go see, they have their family. And even though my aunt has stayed with me and my partner, she knows I'm in a relationship or something, but it's sort of like it isn't held to the same point or of that importance, like where my sister has to get home to her husband, or she doesn't want to take away from my cousin's time with her family, to where I can go and do all the doctor visits and everything like that. And I've talked to other LGBT people, and that's really what happens. But you often wonder who's going to be there for us.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, it's like we're going to take the double hit on that one. One slap on the right and a slap on the left. Man. I, uh, I think it's awesome that our community members, but on the other side, of that coin, I also think sometimes. It's a double-edged sword because on one side, some could take it to think, well, they're gay, I mean, they don't have a life, so they can take care of us, and that's, kind of a negative side of it, I think. Sometimes, I mean, not that they're not appreciative. I'm not saying that by any way, shape, or form. The people that are actually receiving the care are grateful. But, I think maybe other family members, like we have a regular life, they have that other life, so it's not of the same quality or stature, so they can do it.
Exactly. It's sort of like I go to work, I have this, I have that, and everything to do, just like you,
Right.
just like you, but it isn't seen that way.
Yeah, it really doesn't. I mean, and I think that's kind of a sad thing because here we are supposed to be the pariahs of society, and here we are the ones stepping up to the plate. And exactly like you say, then who's going to be there for us? In when our turn comes for needing some help, because that's a scary thought.
Well, it was funny. I was at a meeting with some people, and I was talking to this woman, and we were talking about this very same subject. And I said, you know what? At some point, instead of like Match.com, we should have a thing where it's like younger gay people can be adopted by or hook up with older gay people, and they take care of them. Like, so we are a family, but when we make our own family ties so that we look out after each other, if we can't get it from our biological family.
That's one of the things that I loved about your story is somewhere I remember hearing or reading that you said something about, someone, I think it was in that interview you did with Pride Index where they were speaking, and you basically made the comment that it was thanks to some elders in the community that got you where you are today regarding your activism and whatnot. And I thought, oh, someone who actually respects elders instead of,
Really. And now that I guess, and it's funny that each year you become closer to being an elder yourself. But, really, we can't forget that, I've known I have elders, both gay and straight, and, they did a lot so we could be where we are. They might not have been perfect, but, there are lessons there. Yeah, so if you're not to say, if you don't want to keep making the same mistake, you learn from history.
Exactly, and that's I kind of like go along with the American Indian culture, and many tribal culture, I guess I should say, because it's more of a worldwide occurrence where elders are highly respected and basically like walking history books, as you just kind of alluded to.
Mm-hmm.
It's lessons to be learned there, not to be cast aside as if they're worthless. I think we're seeing a repeat in history these days because of that very fact that people haven't paid much attention to it.
And it can happen. It was a couple years ago, remember they had the March on Washington, and everyone was talking about how it was these young people and they didn't know. Well, I was still on the board of a human rights campaign, and usually after their national dinner, they have like this little brunch. But that Friday night before the dinner, the unanimous vote was like, look, we don't want to do this. We want to march with these young people. But what you saw happen was them sharing stories. You know, a young person would be walking next to a not so young person, and they start sharing stories, and you heard people telling them about Stonewall. And these were things that some of these young people didn't know had happened in LGBT history. And so, you know, I believe in intergenerational work, because there are things that I know I learn from people who are younger than me, and I can learn from people who are older than me, and vice versa. And so I thought that that was like the perfect example of where when we come together, where we each learn, and I think that everyone walked away from there stronger, instead of saying, oh, well, it wasn't started, this march wasn't started by our mainstream organizations, or the young people saying, well, the older one, LGBT people, don't know what to do. It came together where we were all marching together for equality.
Oh, goodness. So wonderful words that we can all learn from each other, because it's no one knows it all. Not any one person knows it all. And I think everyone has something to share. Everyone has a gift. Every individual is special. And if we combine all our efforts that way, that's just a wonderful growing experience. I mean, I'd like to bring up the story that I often do about, two young men in front of a elderly gentleman. They were all watching a pride parade, and these two young men were lovers and hugging each other. And so, gee, this is so much fun. What started this? And the other one says, I don't know, but it's a wonderful party, isn't it? You know?
Yeah, exactly, a wonderful party. No, it's a little bit more. But, it's a start, and we just have to do that. And, it's often about stepping out of our comfort zone. We all have them, and we just have to broaden it and expect it, And if you do it from a level of respect, when I work with young people, I respect them. I know that their way of doing it might be different than mine. And I try to do it. I try not to be judgmental. And remember, I was young once, and I had all these ideas. And the same with your elders. And, if you go into it from a level of respect, and recognize nobody's perfect. Nobody has all the answers, and nobody did everything perfect. But if someone hadn't done something, no matter how imperfect, how much farther back would we be?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's some that would suggest that Stonewall was imperfect. Rioting against the police, coming up in arms, there many would say that is not the right thing to do, but sometimes when push comes to shove, you ain't got much choice.
Yep. Like I said, it's better to do something,
So let's see here. So you grew up in Detroit, and
Mm-hmm.
then you helped your dad when he got sick. So had you already moved away when your dad got sick? Is that the reason you came back?
No. This was years before. No, no, that was years before. No, I came back really then because my mother, who was rarely sick, was sick. And it was like, I loved my mother dearly. And she was also like my best friend. And when I knew that she was sick, something about not being able to be there for her, as she had always been there for me, just like ate at me. And I said, you know what? Time to return to Detroit. But no, that was, I'd say, a good 20 years before all the rest of this happened.
Oh wow! Oh wow!
Mhm.
Wow! Wow! And I saw another video of you speaking at a Pride event, and the video billed you as on the board of directors for what was that, Michigan Equality, was it?
Yes.
Because I just noticed in all this stuff I was reading that when I introduced you and everything, that Michigan Equality wasn't in there anyway. And I'm going, now wait a minute, somewhere in there I read Michigan Equality.
Oh, yeah. Well, Michigan Equality, in Michigan, we had two LGBT organizations, Triangle Foundation and Michigan Equality. And I was on the board of directors, but then um, I was one of the executive directors. We had two of us. One was someone from the trans community and me. And in 2010, they merged the two organizations. But I was always, Michigan Equality. I liked it. It had a different feel to it than Triangle. It was more central, more political. Although Triangle had their role too, but it was a it was a good ride. It was something that I believed in, and I think that we have to fight our issues on many fronts. And I was happy to do that, and I enjoyed it. I mean, I enjoyed it a lot. Like I said, there was a merger, eh, but which is also a sign of the times where we're looking at that many of our organizations really have to look at things and like what can and can't we do. And Michigan had really come under a very anti-gay administration. I mean, in the House, we had a very pro-gay governor at that time, and like we had economic problems, so funding donations were dropping. So it made sense in that way to merge the two organizations. From a community base, did it make sense? Maybe not so much, because I think that you lost a level of involvement. And even in tough economic times, you have to find the way of engaging people. And many organizations, it's like if you make a donation or you're a volunteer, well, what happens when you can't make the donation? And maybe you're working two jobs, so you can't volunteer. How do we keep them engaged? And that's the question that we all have to answer.
Yeah, I think that is. It's terrible, that they had to be diluted like that, kind of, because that's kind of what it is, a dilution. If you have 2 points or two lights of energy, and you got to bring it down to one, that kind of sad. But that's. I'm not surprised, especially in Michigan, because of the. I mean, I've just seen some stuff online over the years, looking at Detroit, which was such a hustle and bustle kind of city. It's terrible what's happened to that city. It's really gone economically speaking. It just seems to be suffering unduly.
And and especially, I mean, Detroit in Southeast Michigan is struggling so hard. But imagine if you're LGBTQ and where we don't have any protections, you can be fired just for being gay. You have a legislature and a governor now who are literally trying to strip us of rights. And so it's really, really hard to be gay and in Michigan. And you can see an effect it has on our organizations. But at some point in time, it's a time when we really must be the strongest. And so often that's why I say that it's important that now that we look at these intersections between social justice and LGBT equality, because in these intersections we find allies, we find numbers, we find strength. Because if not, I mean, the governor that we have now in the legislature is like trying to really turn back the hands of time. And for gay people, already you have a brain drain where you have young LGBT people are graduating from high school, going away to college and never coming back. Or if they go to college here, they're looking for jobs and they're not coming back. So you have this huge drain of this energy in young people. And many of the LGBT people who had jobs have got transferred or lost their jobs and have had to lose. So culturally, and the fabric of Michigan is weakened because of this anti-gay atmosphere. And I think that people don't recognize that because we bring intelligence, we bring creativity, we bring diversity into the fabric of Michigan. And basically right now Michigan is saying we don't want it.
Yeah, and there's so many states where that whole mindset is being duplicated too. I mean, I think, if I remember correctly, I think it's about 20 some odd, 21, 22 states still where a person could be fired just for being homosexual.
Yep.
I mean, thankfully, I mean, if it wasn't for, I believe it was HUD just not too long ago, within the last few years, I believe, passed laws against the housing discrimination that you could be tossed out just because you were homosexual across the nation, until HUD stepped up to the plate here a few years ago.
Yeah, I mean, and really, and it was like to where there's really a recognition that that we are part, and that is a level of discrimination. And the part that I also tell people is like that the perception, because someone can even just think you look gay and not let you live someplace. And so it's to have that recognized by HUD and to really be pushed, because back I can recall working, in fact I mentioned it in the Lift Every Voice, where they didn't like come in and stand up for us. They said, well, HIV and AIDS is a protected class. I said, but what about being gay? Well, people, we're just discriminated against. So it's good now to sort of at least see that step. It's a start, but it's that step.
Yeah, those little steps. I don't know about you, but sometimes I just feel like we're getting crumbs. I mean, here's a little crumb for you. Now shut up and go away.
Well, you know what? I think that because people who are out there doing things like you have a radio program. I mean, this is just blew me away. I'm so happy. But people who are doing it, I am really about coming out. I believe that we should be out, because if only a few of us are there, we're going to get crumbs. But if we come out, and not only, gay people, but our families come out as being a family member of someone gay, and we do it, then instead of getting the crumbs, we reach up there and we take our piece of the pie. But right now, when you look at like in the 2010 elections, only 40% of registered voters came out and voted. And you see what we got in Congress. Mm-hmm. Where was that? Okay, so what we're going to get is crumbs. Where's that 60%? And I know that many of them are fair-minded. What if they had come out? And what if they had voted? So one of the things that I'm constantly telling people is that, no, you don't have to, in your own way, even if what coming out to means is like you tell your neighbors know that you're gay, and they acknowledge that you're, oh, well, don't talk about them. That's our neighbor, and they'll stand up and say something for you. But we can't be silent about it. We have to be out and gay. And in every way, one of the things that I liked about being the thing this year about the Who's Who in Black Detroit, it says community leader. Now, if you read about it, you know that a great part of the community that I deal with is the African American gay community. However, I work with women living and affected with AIDS, homeless, drug addicted communities, youth, all walks.
Uh-oh. That's odd. We seem to have lost audio there for a second, but we appear to be still connected. You still there, Michelle? Yeah, evidently our connection disappeared for whatever reason. I'm going to try to get it back here. See if we can get Michelle back on the line. Oh, goodness gracious. That's what happens. We're using... you there, Michelle?
Yeah, I'm here. I was going like, Tom? So I just called you back. Yeah, so good. Woo.
Yeah, it just in mid-sentence, boom, you were gone. And I went, no, that's not very nice.
Yeah, because I was honest, it was so quiet. I was like, Tom? Oh, wow.
And you were on such a good roll, too. I was like, oh, man.
So where did I leave off?
Last thing I remember, you were mentioning about all the different people, the HIV-infected women within the black community and the youngsters, and and then yeah, it just right there, it just clicked.
Oh, okay. So what I was saying is like, you have to be in going to being out, you have to be concerned about your community. And what I was leading into was a story when we had a marriage amendment on our up for a vote, and so we were going out and we were doing like debates and talking at different places. So I went to this church, which wasn't the most friendly attitude, and I am out as a citizen, as a human being. I'm just doing it. And at a certain point when I was taking all the crap about being gay, and it's Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. There was a woman in the audience who stood up and she said, I don't understand all about being gay. She said, but what I do understand is that woman was with that group that came and cleaned up a vacant lot in our neighborhood and made it safe for us and our kids. She said, so how could I not want, how can I stand against something that's fair for her? And that's part of what being out as human beings does. You get allies in the strangest places.
That's a very powerful story, because I think sometimes people, on the other side, I think sometimes they view us as, well, that's all they talk about is gay stuff and gay this and gay that and gay this. So, here we got an example of something as simple as going and cleaning up a lot somewhere made an impact, which wasn't necessarily gay in any way, shape, or form, but it ended up being.
And that's often the challenge I give to our community, because, even if you look at all these healthcare debates, we weren't there. And we should have been there and been visible, because healthcare affects our community. It really affects our community as to having and not having it. So, and I've talked to legislators, not only in Washington, but here in Michigan, who have said, well, I see you on marriage, on Don't Ask, Don't Tell, on ENDA, but when I go out here on this limb, I don't know that you're there and support me. So we have to do both to people who are elected. We say, yeah, you know what, we want you to be fair on our issues, but when you go out and do the right thing, know that we're going to show up there too. So, it's a challenge to our community as well to sort of say, these are our main issues, but yeah, we care about all the rest, because in some ways they do impact us.
Exactly. I think that's an important point for us all to remember as members of the LGBT community. I was asked not too long ago by an NAACP organization. They recently had their big convention and put forth their new path is to rid their organization of homophobia and to accept LGBT community members into their loving arms. And I think that was an awesome statement. And I heard from a gentleman who was the new in New Jersey, whatever chapters they have up there. He was the new president of that particular chapter up there, which made me wonder, of course, inside, with what happened to the old president,
Mm-hmm.
And he basically sent me an email and told me that he had 1 year to rid his chapter of homophobia, because this was the new direction of the NAACP, which I think is totally awesome. But he asked me, he says, can you point me towards the leaders in the LGBT community? I says, well, there's many people that organize, there's many people that do things, there's many people that do a lot of stuff, but I wouldn't necessarily call them leaders. I think in this day and time, in the 21st century with the internet, that we can all be leaders, that we are all ambassadors of our organization, which is the LGBT community, and that we all need to act like it. Because we don't have a Martin Luther King that's standing up there leading us, putting his life at risk as a single individual, that we all need to do it in total together.
And one of the things at the MBJC, 2 years ago, we hired an executive director who happens to be straight. But as she grew more, she was already an ally, but as she's become more and more, now when someone says to her, oh, and it's nice that you're an ally, and you know what she says? Please don't call me an ally. She says, I'm your sister.
Oh, wow.
And the first time she said that, it was so powerful. And, that's part of the way that people in the NAACP change, because that's just like the article that I wrote for, about the Black Enterprise article. That's what you have to say is, like, we need our community to embrace us and to stop saying, oh, well, we're allies or they're okay. We are you. You are us. So the best way to start homophobia within the NAACP or any other organization is to acknowledge that this is our constituency. These are our people. These are our family. It's not like you're taking in little men from Mars. I'm your neighbor. I'm your sister. I'm your cousin. And to me, that's along the path. So to have them say that they're going to stop homophobia, but then do it. Because sometimes, especially with non-LGBT people, to have someone who is, if that head of that New Jersey thing went in there and said, I'm not an ally, these are my brothers and sisters, to other straight people in there, that's going to be more powerful than to have someone come in and say, well, this is why, it doesn't matter that we don't have, we do have a Martin Luther King because we are people. And Martin Luther King, what he did was more than just for black people.
Yes.
When you saw the March on Washington, you saw black, white, brown, he reached out and he had a message that was for all Americans. The same as his role, so you look and you sort of see that it's about struggle, it's about equality. It's not about, this, that, or the other. You just have to do that, and we have to force it.
Yeah, we really do. I think that's the problem, that there again, we roll back to this cliquish mentality that we started with at the top of the show. That it's us and them. And that's the problem, because it's not us and them. We're all one human family. Mm-hmm. We're all brothers and sisters, and spiritually speaking, there is no color, there is no height, there is no weight, et cetera, et cetera. That we all should be towards the common good, the humanity of it all.
Mm-hmm.
That's the whole thing. Is it because what? Like Martin Luther King said, what affects one of us affects all of us.
Mm-hmm. So and really, if you need a kidney and there's a kidney available, you get the kidney. They don't say, okay, well, there are genetic markers that they look for, but if the kidney's a match, if it came from someone who was Asian, black, Hispanic, if the kidney's a match, it goes into the next person who needs it.
Yep.
Because we're humans,
And if someone was dying, say the most extreme racist in the world, say a KKK member, was there on his deathbed, and the only person available to give him blood and it matched up and all that kind of good stuff was a black person, I have a hard time believing that KKK person would say, no, I'd rather die than take black blood.
Exactly. I just don't see that. I think, there's that part that it is human. There's that part about being human. And that really, if you strip it all away, it's all the same.
Yeah. It really is. And then what brought that to my mind was Senator Inouye, I believe. He's from
mm-hmm.
Hawaii, and he fought in the war, and he's dark-skinned, being from Hawaii, and he was part of the military way back when, when there was a lot of racism within the military, and he got injured in the war, and that's all they would let him have was black blood. And he's made the
mm-hmm.
comment publicly, I have more black blood in me than I do, white blood, So.
Mm-hmm. Really, and we're supposed to have come farther than that to where we have all that designation. Now, when you go into Red Cross to give blood, they don't say, well, you go over here or you go over there. You give blood. And when there's an emergency, they send blood. So we have come beyond that overt segregation, but we just have to take it to the next level. That segregation that we have in our mind, to where black here, white there, gay here, straight there, Latino there. We have to get away from that segregation in our mind.
Yes, so much so. And, that's the one thing, though, I really do applaud the NAACP for putting their best foot forward. I loved your words there, and I'm going to actually email those to that guy. But anyway, I think within the black community, there is a huge issue with regards to LGBTs. This whole down low in the closet thing, with the incidence of HIV and AIDS on the rise in that community, and because and I know, and we've seen it over
mm-hmm.
and over again, when this oppression is going on, that's exactly what causes this sort of thing.
That's right. And again, there's the healthcare is also an issue. Do you have healthcare? But what you do see is, like, when I went on the Michigan Women and AIDS Committee for the state, we tried to go into churches, and I was at a church, and he was talking about how his membership had to understand, and be compassionate to those people out there who had HIV and AIDS. And so afterwards I was talking to the minister and I said, do you know where AIDS is growing? It's in big jumps, heterosexual women, young people, even our senior citizens, not just prostitutes and gays. So if I'm sitting here in your pew and you tell me to be compassionate, but you say to those people out there, what am I going to do? I'm going to suffer in silence.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And many of these heterosexual women, you'll find that later they're victims of domestic abuse. And because we still want to put that stigma over it. And particularly when you look at the ills of the African American community, Lord knows we have enough things without being, worried about the stigma. When you look at healthcare, when you look at if someone's dying from it, usually if it's a single mother, if she dies, she leaves these kids. Who looks after them? I mean, it affects all of us when we try to put blinders on ourselves and say, oh, that's just a gay issue. It's a black gay issue. Black kids bullying. Many people talk about it as far as youth, but I know I've gone in suburbs where the black youth in the school have talked about how they're bullied still just for being black. So let's come together on all of these things. It's still about discrimination, and it amazes me particularly with the African American community. And I was in Charleston, South Carolina, and they talked about how when most of the slaves in this country came through there, and they would pick them into breeding booths, and they would blindfold both the woman and the man, so you didn't know who you had made your child, and to destroy family. But despite that, the sense of family was so important to African Americans that even in the face of being ripped apart, of being beaten and killed, we formed relationships and we formed rituals to acknowledge this relationship, this love, this family. And so when you go and you look at that, and we have fought for it. During slavery, we jumped the broom, even if they did it. There are people who died not wanting to be separated from their kids, who afterwards went and found them. Later on, that's what Loving versus Virginia was about, that, we can love and want to marry. It's as sacred. Don't put laws against it. So to me, for African Americans to be against gay marriage is like crazy. I mean, this is I want to say to them, like, you understand family and what it means to have your family ripped apart, not acknowledged, not respected, and you see the ills that continue to this day. How can you then stand up against marriage? I mean, it's just amazing to me.
Yeah, it amazes me that anyone in the African American community can become an oppressor. That blows me away.
Well, I think that a lot of it's that whole politics of oppression, which is a whole other different story. But that you do see that, and I mean, it repeats itself in many places. I know reading about in Liberia how when they sent the slaves back to Liberia, the ones who came from here and went back became the most oppressive leaders. And so there is that politics of oppression, which is unfortunately part of America. And it's sort of like, it seems like as you raise up the socioeconomic scale or acceptability, then you have to step on the neck of those who you feel are lower than you. And I think that that's the politics of oppression, and people need to think critically and see what they're doing. I don't think that they do. I mean, to have people say that, I know black people say they don't know anybody gay, which, I mean, come on, you know somebody gay. I mean, we always talk about how the people who are in the choir, but there's always been beauticians, there's been people who are doing it. I can remember as a child at my grandmother's house, a woman coming to dinner who was appropriately named Butch. But I knew what the deal was. I mean, so it wasn't like we don't know them. They are there, so how can you deny it? And you haven't overcome if you fall victim to the same bad things that cause segregation, racism. And that's the politics of oppression. And we really we need to have a strong critical discussion amongst ourselves. And I mean, even within our community, when you see those who are LGBT, LGB, and are anti-trans rights.
Oh yeah.
So we really have to have this aha moment when we recognize that we are practicing the politics of oppression as we are being the victims of it. And when we begin to understand what's making us and not being part of a status quo and saying that's not how we want to live, that's not how we want to operate, then you'll see a lot of this stop. But unfortunately, that's one lesson we have not learned from history. Each generation continues to do it over and over and over again. I mean, and it seems to be part of this country because when the founding fathers first they brought over immigrants who were white, and then they made them serfs, and then they're under the serfs were the slaves, and so that each group had somebody else to step on. That seems to be part of our history, like keep them down. And now it's immigrants, and or gays, who's at the bottom rung. And we have to recognize, I don't think that that's what it's about. And I think that the founding fathers were imperfect, but in what they talked about, where all of us are created equal, in those words is the reality. They were imperfect. Many of them had slaves. Women couldn't vote. But in those words that this country was founded on is truth. And we have yet to live up to it.
Amen. That is so true. Oh, goodness gracious. You think we ever will?
I don't know. Sometimes I have faith in young people because you see a lot of kids who are in elementary now, many who have already been exposed to having two mommies, two daddies. You see kids who call themselves queer, and that means that they're not going to, and then they say queer, they're not going to define themselves sexually. There's a faith in youth, and got to keep that, because if you don't keep your faith in youth, then what? But I just sort of believe that they're going to, and you go to school now, every kid has somebody brown in their family, and they know the kid who has the two mommies, who's two daddies. You have kids coming out really young, and their friends are fine with it. I saw the family that the mother wrote the book, The Princess Boy, and to listen to how his father and his brother talked about, well, he just likes to dress up and wear dresses, and that's okay, and how in his school, how that become okay. I have to believe that at some point in that, the melting pot will get really all swirled up in there together where you can't tell one from the other, and then we'll have that, and I have to hold that belief.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so. I think the younger generation definitely got a more open mindset on all that. Definitely, that so what, that's a good line too. Is so what, it doesn't affect us. That what that person does changes my life, not one iota.
Exactly.
That's their life, and it really is. It's respect. If you can't respect someone else, then why should anyone respect you?
Mm-hmm. There's a group in Ann Arbor that they call themselves the Riot Youth, and they're about anti-bullying and things for youth rights and youth empowerment, and they won't dignify it if you say, well, who's gay and who's not. They're about what they see that's happening that's wrong for kids, and how they want a better world. I see them perform, and I have hope.
Yeah, I think the thing I like about the youngsters, I think, is this whole no labels kind of movement that I see within the younger generation. No labels, It's because that's the point, and they got it. They hit the nail on the head with that one, because once they give you a label, then you're put inside this box, and there's this whole bunch of little issues that go along with anyone that's in that box.
Exactly. But you know what? I often put that back on them when they want to call me the elder. I said, you know what? Just call me Michelle, because when you put elders, I feel you're putting me in a box and saying, okay, well, I can only understand this, you know, and you can understand so much more. And I often tell them, one of my mentors, Grace Boggs, who is 96, I mean, she was on Facebook before I was. So I said, so it's okay to say that, and with the respect meaning, but don't put people in the boxes, because you'll surprise yourself and you miss out on so much of what that person can be if you have them sitting in that box.
Oh, yeah. I'll never forget, it was a couple years back. I saw the mayor of San Diego giving a public speech at a podium, breaking down into tears and crying. And because his lesbian daughter came up to him and told him, that her love that she had for the woman that she loved was no less and no greater than the love that her father had for her mother.
Mm.
And that was an epiphany to her father.
Mm-hmm.
And he made a public statement to that with tears in his eyes, saying that I could not tell my daughter that her love was any less than the love I felt for her mother. And I was like, wow.
Okay, so tell me what was wrong with Cheney then. I mean, I just didn't understand that. What's wrong with it? Yeah, I know, it's just bizarre. Like, really, And I'll tell you, when you go lobbying, I've gone lobbying about bullying, and when you take young people, and now I can give them all the right reason why you should do this and the law and everything, but when a young person who could be their child, their grandchild, or whatever, looks at them and says, why won't you do this to protect me? It takes the conversation to a different level.
It really does, especially, well, even like Diaz there in New York and his granddaughters, being a lesbian. And I mean, she was having a rally across the street from where her grandfather was having an anti-gay rally.
And don't you love it? I mean, don't you just love it? Yeah, I just love it.
Yeah, I mean, to me, love that has limits, I have to question that love, quite frankly.
Mm-hmm.
Love is supposed to be unconditional, I would think. Otherwise, it's a fall love. It's not true love.
And and no one, when they have a child, like your grandmother, didn't know what you were going to be. But when your mother said she was pregnant, she loved that grandchild. The same with me. They don't go, well, okay, but if they turn out gay 30 years from now, I'm done with you. When did we lose this? When did we lose that unconditional type of love?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Since we're speaking about youth, let me throw this out here, because when you spoke with that, you did an interview with Pride Index. They asked you if you were not an activist, what would you be? So you stated you could not imagine yourself being anything else. So in looking back at who you were in your childhood and in your growing up years and all the other times before you quote unquote became an activist, do you see attributes that led you down this path?
Well, I think that there's a couple of things. Like, did you read the book of Celestine Prophecy? How they say you're born into a family?
No.
And on my father's side, they were educated, and most of them were preachers or teachers. And on my mother's side, they were more like community people. Theirs was the house where everybody went if you needed some place to stay, or if you wanted dinner. I mean, that was the place it is. So I think that in some ways I was destined to care about people and to talk about it. Okay, so then from that. But then I also remember, and I think that part of it was coming up, like I was always the only one. When we started out, most of my father's family were Baptist too, so he rebelled and we became Catholic. And the Catholic school that I went to, between grade school, middle school, and high school, you could probably count all the African Americans on one hand.
Oh.
So, so I was always that one, and you had to see it. But I can recall both my mother and my grandmother talking to me, and about, instead of retaliating or just pulling in and not being it, about being the better person, and how being that better person, you reached out and you helped, or you helped the other person become better. And that sort of always stuck with me. I think that and although I now question my reason for wanting to have been a nun. It was just something about all those girls in that house together. But there was one group that did sort of more like missionary stuff and everything. But the one or two nuns that I had a relationship to talk to, there was that part about being of service. So I think in my youth, there are a lot of things that came of being of service. And then as I got older, people say, well, what first got you into it? I can recall being amongst my elders about time for voting and them having us go out and pass out flyers or go out and ring bells or go see if Miss So-and-so can come and vote. And that being a part of your community and an active part of your community, I mean, it just like really impressed me. And then when I had a son, I was in my teens and I had a son, but there were people who embraced me, who took me in and said, you know what? Okay, you got a kid, but you can still be all you want to be. And I was embraced and it felt like a family and I felt good. And so all of those things I think sort of made me want to continue in that way. I want that better world.
Awesome. Yay. I mentioned in the communications we had prior to the show and the prep stuff I sent you about possibly if you had a particular a verse, poem, whatever from your book that you wrote, Wild Fruit Hidden in Open Spaces. Did you come up with any piece or anything that you wanted to share with us from that?
I sure did. And this is like, often I'll go like to either poetry readings or conferences and stuff. And so, usually I just read whatever I'm reading to sort of lure them in. But this is what I always call the bombshell. Okay. And I call this one the Genome Project. Okay. Genome Project. I'm not an anomaly, some mistake, even worse, a sin. I am unique, one of a kind. That's right, unique, me with my bad self. Part of the same genome, black, brown, white. I'm as old as yesterday and as new as tomorrow. I am a two-spirited being, same gender loving and sister, brother, friend, LGBT and very queer, but human, just like you. I am magnificent, glorious, and yes, at times, a real piece of work. I am you. I am me. Same genome. I just am.
Wow. Yeah. Oh, goodness. That was totally awesome. Goodness, got to throw some applause for you.
There. Thanks very much.
Didn't know we had an audience, did you?
No. That's cool. That's way cool.
Oh, thanks for sharing that. Oh, so that was from her book, Wild Fruit Hidden in Open Spaces. That's available, of course, on Amazon and is that also on your personal website?
Yes, it is.
And that's your MichelleEBrown.com?
No, it's MichelleElizabethBrown.com.
Oh, goodness gracious. I'm sorry.
Word. And I'm getting ready. I'm trying to migrate it to another one, but that is MyChangeIam.com. So either one, to the Michelle Elizabeth Brown or MyChangeIam.com. You can order it, or through Amazon.
Awesome. Wild Fruit Hidden in Open Spaces. And that's just one of your books.
Yes.
How many in total have you written now?
Well, I've got this book of prose and poetry. I wrote a children's book, which is part of a series, so I'm working on the second one. And I'm working on a novel. And then I've got all these essays from over the years, which I am working with an editor to try to put into some form of commentary on life and gay. Yeah.
Okay, and children's book was...
Oh, the children's book, and you asked me, it's called Jack with the Curly Tail.
Okay, there we go. That's it. But there was a real Jack, right?
Yes. Actually, I have friends who, and it's pretty much happened, this dog came up on New Year's Eve, and so made itself home. and he has a curly tail, and his name is Jack. And on the back of the cover of my book, there's a picture of me and a little girl who has two mommies. And she was always challenging me to tell her stories, but she would see things and ask me why. So I would incorporate it into the story about Jack, and Jack would see it, and we would talk about it. And so eventually I said, oh, I should put all this together. And so I have Jack, and I know that it talks about things like homelessness, because a lot of people now don't recognize that there are families, women and children who are homeless. Many people still try to think of the homeless as indigent men or drug addicts, but there's families who are really living in homelessness. It talks about bullying. It talks about what family is. And in the end, the family it's two mommies, but what is this family? It's the best family in the world, where one of the characters says, where they're loved and how much they really, how important it is and how important, and them welcoming this little dog into the family, just as they are. And that also part of you being, well, he goes through this whole thing about being Jack, and that being Jack means it's like, you're you. You don't have to change. You don't have to be this. All of these things are you, and it makes you the whole. And so don't try to put it aside. Don't try to go into the closet with it. But all this comes out. And I believe you have to fight our fight wherever, in all different ways. I know there's a cartoon, and I can't think of the name of it, where I remember as a kid, and somebody had a bag of tricks. So I have lots of things in my bag of tricks. So this book was in it. And I would have been able to go into public schools and stuff and read to kids and have these conversations with them. And sometimes it's things that the teachers cannot talk about with the kids. They can't talk about a child. Are you, has your family lost its home? Are you homeless? Are you feeling different? But in these reading sessions, and then afterwards I do writing workshops, I've been able to do that. And like I said, I think that our future is in our kids. And so one of my stealth weapons is to go into 3rd to 5th graders and read them this book and talk about this dog. And then the next one, and it keeps going on. And it has a lot to do with diversity, too, about all the different kinds of people who are in the world. So it's all these concepts that I'm trying to put into it. And a lot of what's going into the next book came from questions and things that the kids ask me.
Oh, wow.
Because I think the couple that ends up adopting him is interracial. And the kids look at it. There was one child, when we went through the homeless part, and, I'll read a bit and then we'll stop. And she kept asking me about, well, are homeless people going to be all right? And I do talk about how what a shelter is, and that it should be a place where the community puts their arms around you. And afterwards, the teacher was like so amazed that this kid had talked to me. She said, because, this year she's been so withdrawn. And later to come to find out that both of her parents had lost their job with the auto industry, 2 different companies. They had lost their home, and they were going from relative to relatives. So being homeless was on this child's mind. But, at school, they didn't talk about it. But here we had a way to talk about it. And then we had this conversation when the other kids sort of chimed in, where it wasn't like, they didn't think that this family, which had a kid in it, was bad. One of the things they asked, well, is the family going to be all right? Is the little boy going to be able to go back to school and stuff? So instead of seeing them as a homeless family who are, throwaway people, they finished the book being concerned about what happens to that homeless family. And Miss Brown, you are going to tell us about that. I said, that's in the next one.
That's so awesome because, I mentioned that in the discussions we had on the prep stuff, as far as the email. And then, because there's other books out there like the Entangle Makes Three and the King and King. And those are like the number 1 and 2 books, I think, that the schools are forbidding to even be on the shelves. So, that's at first when I heard about your book, I was thinking, well, sure, the book teaches tolerance and acceptance and whatnot, for things that are different, things in people and animals and whatnot. And I think it's pretty awesome that, that it's there. But in the same thought, I'm also kind of disenchanted that books that dare say or mention anything LGBT are kind of banished.
Yeah, I am too. I think that it bothers me that you can't go in there, and you can't. That still is it. And I mean, I have had very few teachers or whatever come up to me like, okay, oh, you're gay, well, you're not going to talk about that. I've had very few people, because first of all, I come to them as an author and about kids, and that I care about kids. But yes, I think that should be able to find it on the library shelf. But like I said, I believe that we have to fight our battles in many different ways and have a lot of things in our arsenal. And I would hope that my hope with this was that, okay, this is going to open the door. And I know that afterwards, like I'll do a writing workshop, and I've heard from teachers afterwards where like maybe a week later the kids are still talking about aspects of it. And the whole idea behind my book is like that they would read it, and it's supposed to be that answering questions. Ideally, then, and which has happened is like the kids have gone home and talked about it. The parents have bought the book, not knowing, all this stuff is in it. But then they have to have these conversations. And, it's pretty hard to say to your kid, well, no, that little dog should have stayed out on the street rather than go into that home that had those two mommies. Because in it you're happy that this dog has found this family. And so that's the whole idea, is that you develop this dialogue, and in talking to their kids and the kids talking back, because I think I would like to believe that the child would question if the mother said, oh, I'm not going to read any further. We don't care what happens. The child's going to make you finish that book. And then you're going to have that dialogue, and maybe, just maybe, it will open the door in the parent.
Yeah, I'm surprised it hasn't caused you more backlash.
I'm charming. I charm them, I'm just charming, I'm a nerd, but I clean up well. I go in and I just sort of charm them and talk to them. And, like I said, there's different things in my arsenal. And depending on where I am, I not doing the angry black woman anymore, the angry black lesbian. When it's appropriate, I do that. But I have found that it's important that we get into all these other areas, and sometimes I'm just preaching to the choir. I've gone to things that were all white Republicans, and I'm not going to sign up, but I was able to have a dialogue with them, take it away from either side of the aisle, and get to the point where you're saying, like, isn't anti-bullying registration something that should be right down the middle? How can you be on either side of the aisle and do partisan politics? So sometimes we have to be able to step into these other things and think about that and see how you go and do that. And like I said, and I think that part of that does come having always been the only one, like when I was in grade school, to where I had to stand up for myself, that I'll go someplace different and I'll talk to it. And you can find a way that you can find that commonality. And many people say that I'll make the peace, or that I find ways to help people work together or move them forward, but you have to be there. I mean, and that's why I say about us being out, is we have to be there, not just where it's comfortable. We have to be where it is and be prepared to be out and to talk about it. I did an anti-bullying rally in this town in Michigan, which there are no black people. I mean, it's just pretty much white. And when I went, I started telling my story and talking about anti-bullying. And in part of it, I told about being Catholic. And then I went into, and saying that basically I could have been bullied for so many things. I'm tall, I'm thin, I said, but, I told the story about it, and I went through the whole thing. And afterwards, this quiet little woman who was white came over, and she said, that she related to the part of being Catholic. And now I don't practice anymore, but she went on to talk to me about not having an affirming church in her area and the loss that she felt and how important it was to be able to find it. And she also asked me, did I know where was one? And I gave her some places to call. I said, don't call Michigan, Equality Michigan. They might know where there is one. But we have to go in those places. And even if after by saying that and then just standing there listening to her, here she is able to, she in her own way came out to me and talked about that loss and understanding it. It helped her know that she's not the only ex-Catholic or Catholic who's been put out, but that her faith and that loss of faith, that's something real. I might not have experienced, and I'm not that church tied into church, but I do understand how people who are gay feel when they're excluded from their churches and why we must push for that. So we have to go where it is, even when it's uncomfortable. We talk about that 60% of people who didn't vote, they call them that mushy middle. Okay, we have to go to where they are. And we have to say it, and sometimes that means like you're putting a target on your head, but then I have to tailor what I say in a way to reach that common ground with them so that we all come up.
Well said. Okay, so you kind of touched on another point here that we had here in a bullet point regarding religion. And so we know that you, I guess, could say that you used to be Catholic?
Yeah.
Okay. I guess that means you were baptized as a child.
Baptized, first communion, confirmed, the whole 9 yards.
Oh, wow.
I'm an official Catholic. I'm so Catholic that, I remember from the thing that if I get ready to die, I can baptize myself and I'll still go up, But I think that there are good things that I think that I got from my Catholic background and things that I know. But one of the things that I often tell them is that I realize that God does not have a communications problem. He does the burning bush. He does what he has ways to get to you to tell you. So I really don't need this interpreter. And from being Catholic, and which sort of also made me, my thing with different religions is each one says that you have to be this to be saved or to get in heaven. And God and heaven is not Bally's. You don't need a membership card. And so I can understand, and I can have my own relationship with my creator or whatever. I have my own relationship, and I can understand. I can be empathetic to where you're coming from. If you get it through your religion, I see the importance of it. But I don't need an interpreter for God. I know. We had to read, because we had religion every morning, and you had to read all this and do it. I pretty much got, it's in the book. It sort of pretty much tells you what's right and wrong, and it also shows you, if you read the Bible and the parts that you know about Bible, that what Jesus would do is not what most of these people who are out here in their words saying it.
Amen.
So what does Mark say? Religion is opium of the masses. Yeah.
It really is. It's because most people will use the catchphrase, well, religion is personal. My relationship with my God is personal. And but then, then we have all these people that want to get in your face, and this is, my way or the highway kind of attitude. And that's where the problem, I think, comes in, is that they get this self-righteous attitude that their beliefs are the only true beliefs. And I think that causes a lot of problems. I think religion causes undue and untold damage within the LGBT community, because I think there is a whole lot of LGBT community members who are so distraught because of this upbringing in religion that it can affect them for the rest of their lives in a negative way.
Yeah, and it's like they try to find. It is, but in all different faiths, there's a commonality that sort of tells you how to live your life, and to me, that's it. It's there. But nothing says that you have to do it just this way, that way. And, and if you go by, because I often tell people, especially when who are gay, and they say, well, I can't go to church, and they ostracize me, and I'm not wanted, and I'm not going to go. I said, wait a minute. I said, if they ask you, what would Jesus do? I said, he hung out with a prostitute. I said, when he walked through and the lepers touched him, it was all good. I said, so if they're telling you that there's no place for you, they're not reading the book. I said, because Jesus will be right here with us.
Yeah, I believe that too. I mean, it's a tough one. It's a tough one, but I think so much hate comes out of religion, which is just bizarre to me, because the most primal message in religion is supposed to be one of love.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it totally blows me away when we see all these people that want to get on. I think, you know, when you start using the Bible as a weapon, you're using it for a purpose it wasn't intended for.
Mm-hmm. Well, especially if you look at, what is that Westboro church. I
Oh,
mean, you know, it just makes my blood boil. How, when a family is at its lowest and they're trying to say goodbye to the loved one, can you be out there and protest and talk about, you know, you're going to hell, and God hate, and American is bad because we allow gays. I mean, you know, that's not it. I really believe that's really not how it's supposed to happen.
oh, exactly. Yeah, yeah, yep. I mean, it's here on this very show, you know, on this very radio station. I've actually had an incident where a young man actually had a gun to his head, and but he went to his preacher, at his church that he had been raised in, and blah blah blah. And the preacher evidently had heard my radio station before, and told the young man, you know, why don't you go over and listen to this radio station on the internet and check it out. And the kid was blown away that there was, you know, a queer public radio talking publicly in front of God and everybody, you know, about gay things. And it was an epiphany for that young man, and it saved his life. Just that this existed. Not my words or anything I said, just the fact that
Yeah.
this existed saved that young man's life, you know. And to me, that's something that, boy, I will, you know, I put a little notch in my belt, you know. When I think.
Yeah, and rightly so. And rightly so. I mean, you know, yeah, that's why I tell people, when you're being out, you don't have to be a superstar. You're out here, you're doing this show, and somebody can tune it on one day, and that can be the thing that
Yep,
makes it better.
yep.
You know, and so that's why I always say to people, you know, you don't have to be, you know, a superstar and go all out here or be Ellen, you know, be you, the real authentic you.
Yeah, it goes back to a little story I was told one time about a little boy who was walking down the beach after a big storm the night before, and he saw all these starfish up on the shore. And he started grabbing them as fast as he could and throwing them back in the water. And this elderly gentleman came by and said, "There's too many of them. You're not going to make a difference." And the boy looked up at that elderly gentleman, grabbed one of the starfish, threw it back in the water, and said, "Well, I made a difference to that one."
That's cute. That's cute. That is very cute. That's very cute.
And I think that speaks volumes. I think, you know, if we can help one at a time and hope for the domino effect, or as some spiritual leaders have told me in the past, you light a candle and hope that person lights another candle. You know? So,
I mean, and really, and that's it. Like, and I think that that's what elders, or those of us who are in it and we continue, because people say, well, why do you continue to do it? I said, well, you continue to do it because there's always a need for us to be out there and be seen, and saying, yeah, it's hard, but you know, we have to be out there and we're doing it, we have to be courageous, because it's a message that's going out. It might not hit anybody who you're talking to right that moment, but there is that trickle down effect. And you know, pretty soon we've got to hit the critical mass. We just have to.
ain't that the truth? Let's touch on. I mean, religion. We've beat. I think here it's and I talk about it a heck of a lot. Let's touch on education a minute, because I think that's a huge topic, and I think you're pretty active in that environment yourself, huh?
Yep. You know, I don't know if it was on that one. Someone said, like, asked me a question, like, if you could tell the president 3 things, I'd say education, education, education. I've always believed in education. I mean, in fact, I've always believed in reading and knowing about things. I was taught, you know, to be locked on an island with a library, I just learned everything. But education opens doors. It opens minds. If you're educated and you understand how you prevent and how HIV and AIDS transmitted, you're not fearful of it. If you have education that's inclusive in history, so that you see that there have been great LGBT people throughout history, from way back in there, throughout history, then it's not that big a thing to say, oh, I don't know anybody gay, or they've never done anything, they just want for themselves. I was reading recently, and do you know they say that George Washington Carver was gay?
No, I hadn't read that.
And they said and they said that, that he was always, okay, now you learn about him. What's wrong with, so being gay doesn't mean that, you're destined to just do hair. Look, you could be George Washington Carver. I mean, so there's so many things out there that education shows us how to live better in harmony with our world, because, there's only so many resources here in the world, and we're rapidly using them up and using our minds to sort of come up and do it. And I like one of my favorite books that I think talks about it is Starhawk wrote a book, The Fifth Sacred Thing. And in it, it's like futuristic. And it's like a society where they work together, people aren't segregated based on their sexual orientation. I mean, they're environmentally conscientious, and it's just a better way of living together as one. And education comes from that. Education, we have these minds that we don't use all of. Education should be there. And then when we talk about the 21st century, and because you use all of these books, I read The World is Flat. And the reality is our kids aren't prepared because they don't have that education to do it. And maybe the person who's going to find an answer to the combustible engine, which is taking off in China, where the air quality is going, is right here. But they're not getting it from education. You never stop learning. And I think that to have education that includes the arts, music, so that you're rounded. When you're rounded and you know that there's a world, I knew that there's more than what happens in Detroit because I went to the library and I read. And I knew that there was a world out there that I could visit and that I could accomplish and do things. That comes from education. And I think that now, especially even though we're all connected by the internet and everything, we lose sight of what is. And sometimes people's news comes from blogs or whatever, which isn't real. You don't have anybody, I mean, I'm surprised that Michelle Bachmann is going as far as this, because the woman is dumb as a doorknob. She keeps making historical gaffes. Who's calling her on that? Maybe we would get better in politics if more of us understood how our political process and our system of democracy is set up. And then we could know that maybe what we need to do is go and influence this, go do that. All of these comes from being an educated community. And I think that that's so important.
Yeah, it really is. Regarding Bachman, the only one I've seen her call on it was Anderson Cooper actually called her on some of this stuff.
Nobody calls her on it. And yet they keep showing her and they say, oh, she's a front runner. That just scared the hell out of the world. Why do they keep quoting her? And that's just it. Let's have a civilized discourse on what's really happening in this country. And that's what they're not. And they're taking, she wants to bring back, defend DOMA and all that. Okay, you're against families. Okay, well, let's talk about what it really is. It's about family. Who is there to call her, other than Anderson Cooper? Who's calling any of them on that? Mm-hmm. Rick Perry, who thinks that the worst thing that happened was Lawrence versus Texas. That was all wrong. Okay, who's calling him on it? And a lot of our young people, do they even know what Lawrence versus Texas was?
Yeah.
Do they? Yeah. So, I've gone into classrooms and spoken sometimes, and these are like freshmen in college or something. I'm just astounded on the lack of history that they did. But it's because of the education system. It's broken. We need to do I'm a big proponent of community education, because the ideal is like you don't just let the village raise the child. You raise the village as you raise the child.
Yeah, amen. That's what I love about the new California law. Where they're going to start teaching. Well, I think they call it social studies these days, or the history, where they're going to openly speak about honest history instead of, because I think education has become, in my mind, indoctrination.
Thank you.
When you start censorship and you start leaving out points and pieces and important, and you can mention somebody without ever mentioning that they were gay and or what, because they sure don't mind mentioning if that they had a wife and kids, but then, and that's a double standard, because they
or you know what, they had several wives with kids by several people. I mean, they don't talk about that, but you put these up here, as these are your heroes, they're going to talk about it. Well, forget all this other stuff they did, but, don't even talk about somebody who's gay, who might have, really benefited the community and done a whole lot. But then you're going to put somebody up who was a womanizer and probably, married, next one they married had been the mistress from the last one.
Mm-hmm.
How do you expect kids to make the right decisions? How do you expect people to make the right decisions?
Yeah, because that puts forth a bad example, because that's because when you teach, it's like a promotion. You're promoting something when you teach something to these young, impressionable minds.
Mm-hmm. I mean, really, you do. It's sort of like, and this is what they see. I mean, half of them sit and watch TV, and they really think that that's how it is, and there's no balance, and they're taking away, and the school system, the way that it's set up, it just can't do it. I know they're cutting the funding and stuff, and I do agree with the person like that. If you're going to invest in something, we have to invest in education, and because what do you think out? And here in Michigan, they're cutting education here to where, like, they predict that there'll be classrooms with 65 kids in it.
Oh my goodness.
Okay, that's just warehousing them and passing them along. So how do you have engaged, contributing adults come from that environment?
Yeah, I mean, the dropout rate alone is astounding these days, especially within the black community. And, I had this discussion not too long ago with another black friend of mine, and I said, he said, well, it's a lost cause. And I said, no, it isn't. I said that when they take the funding away from these schools, they raise the class sizes. These teachers are becoming nothing more than babysitters instead of teachers. They don't have the time or the energy to devote to that many students. They need, and this whole thing with Wisconsin, when they started doing this union busting thing, they weren't leaving out the teachers union. And how can you compare a teachers union to an auto workers union? That's night and day.
Really, I mean, and what are you preparing our kids from? I often say, people, and I know that they don't like to hear it, but I talk about, because in Detroit we have such a high dropout rate. We have, like, at one point they said half of the workforce that was available was functionally illiterate. And I was on something, I said, that basically when you're talking about 65 kids in a classroom, you're basically warehousing them till you can send them to prison.
Mm-hmm.
And we see that what they're doing in prisons now, I was talking to someone, how it's a complex. I thought honestly, someone said in Colorado, most of your Kevlar vests are made in prison. It's like cheap labor. So this is what you're doing to our youth. And,
Yep.
It's just not acceptable.
It's not acceptable at all, because for eons and eons, decades and decades, we've been hearing education, 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 education. If we want to be, the biggest nation and the strongest nation, and it's all about education, and that's some of the first things they're cutting now.
Mm-hmm.
That should be last on the chopping block,
And I know when the world is flat, they said that the places that are going to be left behind are like sub-Saharan Africa and our urban areas, because our youth are not prepared for the new science and new technologies that are coming out.
Yeah, we have other countries that are just Japan and China and all these guys that are just leaving us in the dust on that stuff.
Yeah.
It's
So education is like, and you know what? And these kids can. I think that the other part that I talk about education is like maybe you have to break the mold. We can't go at them at the same way because they are more visual and they're more onto it. But we have to like invest in our kids and break the mold to find a way. How do you deal with them? How do you get to them? How do you stimulate their minds? If they're gay, how do you get them by letting a gay kid know that there are gay people who can be their heroes and look up to them. I see lots of gay kids who say, well, I just sort of sit there and I don't want to talk. I don't want to draw any attention to myself. So they're not learning and they're not contributing. But if they saw someone who looked like them or heard about someone like them who went on to accomplish something and do something, well, first of all, you do see that it can get better. And it can get better for you because, look, that person went through a lot of what it is. And you open up and you become a sponge and you give back to the classroom and you take in new information. So, this testing and handing them books and limiting what kids are exposed to is the death of them, really. I mean, it's just like, it's such a disservice to our kids.
It's sink or swim. That's all it is now in the education. Sink or swim. You either got what's needed to make it or don't. It's just like the rest of it. We see this vast divide between the rich and the poor, or the haves and the have-nots. No matter whatever words you want to put on it, because I think words there we get to the labels and the boxes. You say rich and poor, and people think, oh, here we go again. Call it the haves and have-nots if that'll make you feel better. It's this distinction, this vast crevice we have between us, when we're all supposed to be one, and this sink or swim kind of mentality. And basically what they're saying is we have acceptable losses, like it's a war. These are collateral losses. Collateral losses are acceptable, and if they're not bright enough to make it through the school system as it is, so they're just a collateral loss.
And and we have it within our community too, that we have to, because look at don't ask, don't tell. In fact, I had a congressman say, I'd like to see some of the real stories, because he said, I don't have any problem with it, but if I see another white man come up and talk about, under don't ask, don't tell, he said, I know, but what about the rest of them? And did you know that more African American lesbians were put out of the military under don't ask, don't tell than any other group?
I didn't know that.
And part of and it's a different thing, because you can't, and when people and that's what I like about the National Black Justice Coalition, to talk about many people, they still equate gay with white male affluence. But most of us are living a regular everyday life. Okay. If you look at the difference between, I talked to a friend of mine who's white trans, and she said, she has nothing in common, really. She said a lot with women who are black trans. And she said because she had the means and the ability to do her transformation. And if she wanted to, just blend into it. We did a panel, and we had a trans panel. It was like to get beyond Trans 101. And what was interesting was most of the ones who were white talked about the problems they were having on their job with acceptance, and that they had health insurance. Many of the ones who were black and Latino were street workers, were sex workers. And that disparity, when you look at it, is marriage an issue? Yes, a marriage is an issue. But if you don't have a job and you have no chance of getting a job, like many people who are at the lower end of a socioeconomic ladder, okay, what good is it if I can get married but I can't support my family? So even within our community, we have to look at our issues and recognize that, hey, everybody isn't Joe Solomonese. And I know him and I love him, but everybody isn't Joe Solomonese, and who with his Prada bag and all of this, and who lives in a nice part of Washington, and he's out there speaking for our rights. But he doesn't know what goes on in our neighborhoods. He probably doesn't know about people who listen to gay talk radio. He's on Sirius, so, I mean, they're not in touch. And so we have to overcome that gap ourselves in our community to be one strong community.
Yeah, I don't want to bash Joe, so I'll reserve my...
No, I know Joe. I know Joe. I like Joe. In fact, once we were on a thing and he came up with, he had his Prada bag, and I said, well, and I came up after him. I said, well, I got this from the thrift store, and we laughed. I like Joe, and he and I have had the same conversation. He also recognizes it. I like Joe. And I think that under Joe, the Human Rights Campaign has come a long way as far as diversity.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't where it should be. I mean, could be in the end, but it was a change, and it was a good change.
Yeah, I actually used to be a contributor to HRC until what happened when the whole when they were the first time around on Matthew Shepard, and when them and Barney Frank kind of jumped in bed with throwing the trans under the bus. I didn't like that. I did not like that.
Well, I was on the board of governors, so I was all in, and that was just it. You threw the trans under the bus, and it was something that I just couldn't sit with, and that's when I started to not be as engaged with the Human Rights Campaign. But do I still support them? Yes, because there's a role in our world for all of us. Like, we got a lot of arsenals in our bag. HRC is one of them. NGLTF is one of them. You and I are one of them. And it's going to take all of us to get to the mountaintop.
Oh, yeah. It's a slow, hard climb, but we're making progress. So that's awesome. I also wanted to touch on because you're big on breast cancer. And I wanted to give you, and I think that kind of speaks to what we've been saying the whole show, is that we don't have to be all gay all the time. And I think that was pretty awesome. Some of the breast, what made you such an advocate for breast cancer?
Okay, well, first of all, I said lesbians are at a higher risk for breast cancer than other women, because generally we might not have children, or we postpone having children. So that was one of them. But what got me into really being my sister, who, one thing that she always does is she does breast cancer 3 days. She walks and she does everything. And, I support her with money. But a couple of years ago, I went into the doctor, and I've never smoked or anything, and they found a tumor. And because of the funds and stuff that have been raised by people who volunteer to do it, it was found so early that I was able to have minimally invasive surgery. I'm okay. I'm here today. And so at once you come in, because the first thing I was going like, what do you mean? I don't smoke. I don't have any of the risk factors. Nobody in my family did it. And then I started to read and learn more about it and recognize that not only as being the African American affected my community, but as being a lesbian, it affected my community. And it gave me a whole different respect for those people who go out there and walk that 3-day. I support them, and I try to talk to people about it, because the other thing that happened was, at that point in time, I didn't have health insurance. Okay? And which is another thing that you find that many people in both of my communities, we don't have. And so I had put off having a mammogram. I had insurance when they found it. I had not had a mammogram in 3 years because I didn't have health insurance.
Mm-hmm.
So these are things, there are cures there. It's very real. We have to take care of ourselves. We should know. And especially many of my lesbian friends did not realize that they were at greater risk. Many of them were like me, who didn't go have mammograms. It's something I put off, or I can't afford it. And this is like, women's health issues are really important. And one of the biggest ones is breast cancer. So, and men can get breast cancer too, because in it I met a gay man who had it, in my research. So it is one of those issues that is also our issue. And we need to be out there talking about it, particularly because it's something that in a gay community, we don't, we're talking about all these other things. We might talk about HIV, but how many times do you see us sitting around talking about breast cancer? Mm-hmm. We're not. We need to have those conversations, because it's something that we're really at risk for. And, hey, I'm living testimony.
That's awesome. I did not know that. A lesbian who doesn't give birth is at higher risk for breast cancer, huh?
Yeah. Or if you, they say that's one of the reasons why lesbians are, because either they don't give birth, women who postpone giving birth. And we see so many of our sisters now who are like in their 40s and are just having their kids. But if you never give birth, or if you postpone to late in life to give birth, it increases your possibility of getting breast cancer.
Wow. That's a wonderful tidbit to know, and I think, goodness gracious, I hope some people hear that because I'm sure there's a lot out there that need to hear that message.
And and now a lot of our organizations are starting to talk about it, and you see that a lot of places are having women's health clinics, like in our community centers, to just sort of look at some of these basic things, because even on the bigger thing, women still are making lower money and have greater unemployment than men. And it mirrors that in the LGBT community. So a lot of our LGBT centers are having health care for men and for women. And I mean, if you're a lesbian and you haven't been, find one in your area and go. Sometimes, some places you can find a doctor who is a lesbian who will work wonders with fees to get it done, but get it done. Everyone in our community is so important that I don't want to lose one sister to breast cancer that could have been prevented.
Awesome. Well, goodness gracious, I just looked at the clock. I can't believe we've already come around on 2 hours here. I'll give you like 3 minutes here in case there's anything that we missed and anything you want to say. The podium is yours.
Well, I mean, I think that, like, one thing that I always encourage people, and I go back to it a million times, is, be out, be proud of you. I think that being gay is one of the best things you can be, because, you've got the whole world around it, and we need to quit putting ourselves down and see that great person and let someone else see you being that proud and affirming person, and talk about it. Being gay it's no big secret. Guess what? I shop like the next person. Tell people, because we're not looking for special rights. We're looking for the same rights. And stand up and demand those same rights. And don't stop talking about them till we get them.
Yeah, there we go. Awesome. Oh, Michelle, thank you so much. I couldn't believe that 2 hours went by so quickly. Oh, my goodness.
Well, it is. It's like, well, like you said, it's like it was a conversation with a friend, and I'm so glad to have had it with you.
Oh, I'm glad myself. I am awesome. We might have to just get you back here again.
Well, you got my number.
Yeah, I sure
You got my number. Now I expect you to call, because I'll tell you, once you talk to me, you're my friend.
Oh, thanks. Well, you're my friend too, Michelle, and I appreciate you. And you're a friend of Queer Public Radios and Gay Talk Radio and all of us. We just can't thank you enough for being here and for doing what you do. For all of us, I think everybody in the community should be honored to have you doing what you do, because it's people like you, I think, that kind of set the bar up pretty high for the rest of us.
Well, but you know what? The bar might be high, but I got my hand out to bring you on with me.
There we go.
Always.
Thank you, Michelle, and you take care of yourself.
Okay, Tom, you have a great day.
Okay, you too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Check out her website at MichelleElizabethBrown.com. MichelleElizabethBrown.com. It's all common spelling. Awesome lady. Oh, man, so honored to have her with us. All the best to you and yours, and we'll see you next time right here on QueerPublicRadio.com.